Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're from the seventh group. We would like to present about the phenomenology and grounded theory. So before we continue to discuss this material, we would like to introduce ourselves first. The members, for the first member, there is Bella Rianita Sari and me, Ikke Lailatun and our another member that is Livaini Putri. So I'm going to show you about the table of content first. So before we discuss about the further material, we'd like to talk about the theory that phenomenology and grounded have. So for the first, there is phenomenology theory. The phenomenology research is a study that focuses on a description and interpretation of people's lived experiences during their lifetime. Means that one time there is Edmund Husserl, a German philosopher, became successful in his attempt to establish phenomenology as an approach to study lived experiences of human beings at the conscious level of understanding. Husserl's perspective of phenomenology is a science of understanding human beings at a deeper level by casing the phenomenon. For instance, the Husserlian perspective of phenomenology is central to the concept of description of the invariant aspect of phenomenology as they appear to consciousness. It implies that the phenomenology is an approach to educate our own vision, to divine our precision, to broaden how we see the world around, and to study the lived experience at deeper level. So, therefore, holds both the characteristics of philosophy as well as a method of inquiry. The purpose of this work is to seek logical answers to some of the key questions about the phenomenology as a philosophy. Meanwhile, the grounded theory is a qualitative study of a grounded of theoretically complete explanation about the phenomenon. Grounded theory is a qualitative methodology used to develop theory grounded in the experience of the participants by Edwards and Jones 2009. It has been recognized as an emergent method in the field of social research. Emergent in the sense that is inductive, indeterminate, and open-ended, where the theory develops from the data as it is collected and analyzed. In grounded theory, the process of analysis takes place from the first time that the data begins to be collected and continues until the research study is completed. According to Creswell 2005, in grounded theory, the researchers analyze it immediately rather than waiting until all the data are collected and then bases this decision about what the data to collect next on this analyze. So when the researcher such as interviews, observations, and discussion as data collection strategies within a phenomenological method of inquiry. Therefore, phenomenology has both a philosophical and methodological stances. To this end, one needs to understand it from a historical and philosophical standpoint. So, the first very deep talk. Interview. Phenomenologists during interview they tend to ask participants to describe their experience concretely by posing such a question. So, because the phenomenologists will have the interview that will be tend to ask a participant to describe their experience concretely by posing such a question. They will be giving a question such as, how would you describe a typical day? Or please describe that particular incident in more detail. This way of opening a dialogue is valued over and above asking more general abstract questions such as what does the experience of friendship mean to you, or what is depression, and so on. And then for the next one, there is participant observation. Observation data collection method is classified as participatory study because the researcher has to immerse herself in a setting where her respondents are while taking notes or recording. So the advantages of observation data collection method include direct access to research phenomena, high levels of flexibility in terms of application, and generating a permanent record of phenomena to be preferred to later at the same time. Observation method is disadvantaged with longer time requirements like high levels of observer bias and impact of observer on primary data in a way that presence of observer may influence the behavior of several group. And the next one, there is a reporting. So the reader should be able to work through from the findings to the theories and see how the researcher has arrived at his or her interpretations. So from phenomenological findings needs to done transparently if it is to have validity. So that tell description of the phenomenon before reaching at interpretation of the description or the interpretation of the research participant. In doing that, a summary of the findings, discussion on findings, and recommendation of future implications seem fundamental in phenomenological research to make things vivid to readers about the report. For example, providing a summary of the findings of meetings issues needs to be read clearly without any bias. These findings can be vigorously reported through the use of direct quotations of the research participant and interpreting through description rather explanation. And the next one is about a focus group or focus meeting. It is a type of in-depth interview accomplished in group whose meeting present characteristics defined with respect to the proposal, size, composition, and interview procedures. Focus group discussion is frequently used as a qualitative approach to gain in-depth understanding of social issues. The observation aims to obtain data from purposely selected group of individuals rather than from a statistically representative sample of a broader population. So even though the application of this method is conversation, research has been extensive, there are no critical assessment of the application on the technique. So in addition, there are no readily available guidelines for conversation researchers. And the last data from the phenomenology research, there is analysis. Phenomenological use this step to generate a large quantity of interview notes, tape recordings, jottings, or other records, all of which have to be analyzed. Analysis is also necessarily messy. Without analyzing this, as the data doesn't tend to fall into neat categories, and there can be for so we're moving to the next slide. There is similarly, in the process of data analysis, various processes are involved like coding, constant comparison, memo writing, subcategories and core categories, densification and saturation of core categories, vertical sampling, and sorting and writing theory cross-referencing with literature, etc., to understand the grounded theory in detail. One needs to understand this all in detail. Like for the first point of this ways is a coding. Coding is a basic analysis process which starts from the beginning of the study and ends with the theoretical model of a grounded theory with the three types. For the first, the open coding, constant comparison, core categories. So open coding is employed initially along with memo writing. It is the first interpretative process by which data are broken down analytically and examined and coded through a process which factors the data into discrete threads of datum by Jones and Allen in 2011. So the purpose of open coding is to help the analyst gain the insight into the data by the breaking through standard ways thinking about phenomena reflected into the data. And the next point, the constant comparison. Once the data are transcribed, they are managed to be coded through the open coding. Open coding utilizes the process of constant comparison. In opening coding, data or opinions are compared against other for similarities and differences. They are also conceptually labeled. In this way, the conceptually similar categories are grouped together to form core categories and subcategories. As categories start to accumulate and gain depth, constant comparison compels the researcher to begin to reflect on the data to commence conceptualization, usually using memo to record the researcher's reflection and annotations. And the next one for the C point is core categories and subcategories. The theories can't be built with actual incidents or activities as observed or reported. They are from raw data, so these incidents or events that happen are taken and analyzed as potential indicators of phenomena. These phenomena are known as concepts, which are the basic units of analysis from where the categories are developed and related. All the concepts can become categories. Categories are generated through the analytic process of making comparisons. And the next one is the selective coding. The selective coding is the process of choosing one category to be the core category and relating all other categories to the category. So when core categories become apparent, then densified and able to explain most of the variations which present the participants' major concern, then selective coding starts. According to Brogatti, selective coding is a process of choosing one category to be the core category and relating all other category to the category that is called the IBIT. This is the essential idea to develop a single storyline around which everything else revolves. And for the next one is the theoretical coding. When the data, all data that has been collected, the, that are being coded, compared, and accumulated to form the categories and core categories, on an ongoing process of sampling takes place that is known as theoretical sampling. So the final stage of the coding process is known as theoretical coding. It occurs when core categories have become structured in a simple understanding. So the theoretical coding needs the factored pieces back together again to conceptualize causal relationship between And the next point, there is a densification occurs when gathering more data sheds no further light on the properties of their theoretical category. So the process of designing core category comes under the term densification and saturation. So according to Corbin and Strauss, 1990, the core category represents the central phenomena of the study. It is defined by asking questions such as what is the main idea presented by these researchers. If I have to conceptualize my study in a few sentences, what would I say, etc. And memo writing. Memos are either field notes or code notes that are prepared by the researcher in the process of data collection and analyzed in a grounded theory. Memos are sorted and resorted during the writing process, which rests on a firm base of theoretical memos. If a researcher omits memoing and moves directly from coding to writing, then a great deal of conceptual detail is lost or left undeveloped. That is The theory that we took is from the Corbin and Strauss 1990. And the next one is a memo theory. Generating grounded theory means arriving at the theory suitable to its supposed usage. Glaser and Strauss 1967 say good theory is produced by a fortunate combination in inquiring mind, rich experience, and stimulating the data. So actually, this is the final stage of grounded theory methodology. It is a very method that really careful and systematic construction job where it does capture essential points around in the research. So Glasser further suggests write conceptually by making theoretical statements about the relationship between concepts rather than writing descriptive statement about people. Here, theorists should view the data as a source of indicators to be coded, conceptualized, and theorized. So we're moving to the next slide. That is the similarities of phenomenology and grounded theory.
Okay. Next point is about similarities between phenomenology and planetary. And the first one is both methods look at real life situation. Both take an interpretive approach in which the researcher seeks to explore real life situation and require a high degree of interaction between the researchers and the individual groups or situation being examined. Um, this usually takes the form of interviews and or observations. The second one is seek to collect and analyze data from participant perspective and try to ensure their findings are not influenced by person-based ideas. This would vary between, I mean, phenomenology and grounded theory. Both grounded theorists seek to collect and analyze data from participants' perspective and try to ensure their findings are not influenced by person-first ideas. To achieve this, they often involve participants in data analysis to make findings more trustworthy. Um, in brief, grounded theorists and phenomenologists both seek to explore individuals' experiences in the context of the world in which they live, and credit theory and phenomenology both start methodologically with data collection and generally share a descriptive approach. The next slide, next slide is about advantage of phenomenology theory. The first one, it offers the prospect of obtaining authentic, in-depth accounts of complex phenomena as experienced by individuals and group of people. Second one, humanistic style of research is like it is a humanistic style of research that pays attention to the life experience of people in the everyday world. Next is it is suited to small-scale research because it is reliant on in-depth interviews which can be undertaken in specific localities such as hospitals, schools, or business, and when funding is short, addresses um, is the main resource. The last one is potentially of interest to a wider range of readers. Is like the resulting descriptions of people experience are potentially of interest to a wider range of readers. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. The next point is disadvantage of phenomenology theory. The first one, it is claimed the approach is subjective and lacks scientific rigor. Since the approach is by definition a way of delivering subjective accounts of people's life experience, there are no objective measure of reliability or representativeness for the researchers to use. when working in this way. Second, critics claim it is primarily concerned with providing descriptions rather than explanations. The third, because phenomenological research tends to be concerned with small rather than large number of instances, so generalizations based on finding can't be drawn. Number four, critics claim the approach causes researchers to focus on mundane, trivial, and relatively unimportant subjective issues rather than the big issues of the day. The last one is critics argue that it is not possible for us to suspend entirely our presuppositions when considering the views and opinions of other people. Next slide. Next slide, please. The next slide is just discuss about the advantage of grounded theory. The first one, um, whether researchers make an inquiry when no relevant theory exists, grounded theory gives the researcher a creative approach without confining him or her to an already existing realm of theory. Then second one, data depth and richness. Um, it allows the researcher to look at phenomena with new eyes, like new perspective without restriction within already existing hypothesis. The approach used by grounded theorists to collect rich data is another advantage that is substantial. Rich data will make the world appear new because the richness of data will provide the researchers with concrete and dense fabric to construct a thorough analysis of the data in addition to aiding the researcher to go beneath the surface of the participant's social and subjective life. Number three, it allows the researcher to understand phenomena holistically. And then the last one is systematic approach to data analysis. Compared to other qualitative research methods, it has a better defined procedure in the coding process. A notable advantage of grounded method is in its systematic approach to data analysis, and based on Glasser, defines grounded theory as systematic generating of theory from data that itself is systematically obtained from social research. Next slide. Okay. Next point is about the disadvantage of grounded theory. The first one, novice researchers experience confusion in conducting the research because of the number of variations in the original grounded theory. The novice researchers experience confusion is conducting their research. So researchers need to conduct the research with understanding of different coding processes from different passions. Number two, it does not provide a predefined research sampling process. In order to achieve saturation in theoretical sampling, so the researcher must exercise stringent theoretical sensitivity in the data analysis process. Number three, it is not an effective process in terms of time and energy because of the labor-intensive coding process, about the coding process itself. Although there is a follows a rigorous coding process, he or she may not find any substantial theory. And the last one is because of theoretical sampling and saturation, anticipating the rate of research direct is difficult. That's all from me. The next presenter is Lisa.
Okay, for the next slide or the last slide is for the differences between the phenomenology and the grounded theory.
Okay, after we are discussing about what is phenomenology and then what is grounded theory and also how to collect the data, and we also learn about the similarities between two of them and also the advantages and disadvantages of each strategy of each research. Now it's time for me to explain what are the differences between phenomenology and grounded theory. As you can see on your screen, there are several items differentiate phenomenology and grounded theory. The first one is history. So, phenomenology emerged from philosophy, meanwhile, the grounded theory developed in sociology. And then the second is about the goal. So, phenomenology is to describe and explore the lived experiences of a phenomenon. Meanwhile, the grounded theory is to evolve or ground a theory in the context in which the phenomenon under study occurs. So, the grounded theory is about how is the phenomenon occurs, meanwhile, the phenomenology is about how people live in that kind of phenomenon. And then the next is about sample. So phenomenology sample are the experience the phenomenon of interest. Meanwhile, the grounded theory are those who have experienced the phenomenon under different conditions. So for the phenomenology, the sample is more specific, particular in a condition, and the grounded theory, it's wider. And then by the observations, phenomenology observe participants in the context where the phenomenon is experienced, but the grounded theory observe participants where the basic social process take place. The next is about audience. The audience of phenomenology are those who need to understand the lived experience of the phenomenon of interest. But the grounded theory are those who seek explanatory models upon which to design intervention. And then the last difference is product. Phenomenology product is a thematic description of the break-even essences and structures of lived experiences. But the grounded theory is generate theory from the range of the participants' experience. That's all from me.
So that's all from the presentation this afternoon. So I hope you guys understood every single explanation that we have delivered before. So if you have any question or suggestion, you may just ask a question under the comment. So let's close this presentation. And the last we say, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.